9 months had passed since Raymond arrived in the UK. What once felt overwhelming had now been brought under control. The operational challenges that greeted him on arrival, disorganization, inefficiencies, gaps in coordination, had all been systematically addressed. Processes were now streamlined. Teams were aligned. Structures were strengthened. Every unit of the business was functioning with precision. What had once required constant supervision now ran smoothly, almost effortlessly. Raymond stood in his office, looking over reports that confirmed it. Everything had been done. And done well. For the first time since his arrival. There was no fire to put out. No urgent crisis demanding his attention. Just calm. But in that calm, another thought began to rise. Work was no longer the distraction it once was. And now, he could no longer avoid what truly mattered. With work finally settled, Raymond could no longer ignore the other part of his life. His heart. Over the past months, clarity had come quietly, but firmly. He had made his choice. Janet. What began as distance had only strengthened their connection. They now spoke every day, calls, messages, shared moments across time zones. Their conversations were no longer uncertain. They were intentional. Plans had begun to form. Real plans. A future. Marriage. And for the first time, it felt right. As for Stella, there had been no communication for over 2.5 months. No calls. No messages. No explanations. The silence had said everything words could not. Whatever had once existed between them was gone. Raymond stood by his window, looking out at the London skyline. In 2 weeks, his assignment would be complete. And he would return to Nigeria. Not with hesitation this time, but with purpose. He smiled slightly to himself. Janet had no idea. He was coming home. With a ring. Raymond's return to Nigeria was quiet. No announcements. No attention. Just a calm arrival, the kind that carried purpose. The city felt familiar again. Different, but familiar. One of his first stops was to see Ode. They sat across from each other, the air steady but observant. "I've completed the assignment," Raymond said confidently. "Everything is in order over there." Ade nodded slowly, studying him. Raymond's tone carried a new kind of certainty, not just about work, but about himself. "There's something else," Raymond added. A slight pause. "I've made my choice." Ade didn't respond immediately. But the message was clear. Raymond had returned not just successful, but decided. Later that day, Raymond drove to visit Uncle Tammy. The moment he saw him, his expression softened. "Uncle," he greeted warmly. They sat together, just as they had months ago. Raymond didn't waste time. "Your advice, it worked," he said. Distance revealed everything. Uncle Tammy nodded quietly. Raymond continued, a calm confidence in his voice. "I've made my choice." A brief silence followed. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was closure. That evening, Raymond sat with his mother in the living room. The atmosphere was calm, but deliberate. He didn't rush. Mom, he began gently, I want to tell you everything. She listened. Raymond spoke about his time abroad, the challenges, the progress, the success. Then he moved to what truly mattered. He told her about visiting Uncle Tammy before he left, about the advice he received, about distance revealing truth. His mother's expression remained composed, but attentive. Raymond continued. While I was away, I watched. He explained Stella's silence. How the calls stopped. How the messages faded. How, over time, there was nothing left to hold on to. Then he spoke about Janet. How she stayed. How she called. How she checked on him. How she sent things, not out of obligation, but out of care. He paused briefly. That meant something, he said quietly. His mother said nothing. Raymond looked at her directly. I didn't choose Janet because it was easy, he continued. I chose her because it was real. The room fell into a thoughtful silence. And for the first time, Raymond wasn't explaining. He was declaring. Raymond's words settled heavily in the room. For a long moment, his mother said nothing. She had listened. Truly listened. And for the first time, there was no immediate resistance. No sharp dismissal. No attempt to redirect him. Just silence. Measured. Thoughtful. She looked at him, not as a boy to be guided, but as a man who had made his decision. A slow breath escaped her. It seems, she said quietly, you have already chosen your path. Raymond held her gaze. I have. Another pause. Then, something shifted. Subtly. But clearly. His mother nodded. Not in excitement. But in acceptance. I may not have chosen this for you, she said, but I can see that you understand why you have. Raymond exhaled softly. Relief, quiet but real. I intend to marry Janet, he added. In the coming months. His mother studied him one more time. Then gave a small, firm nod. Then you have my blessing. And in that moment, the resistance that once stood between them finally gave way. Life began to settle into something new. Something warm. Something certain. Raymond and Janet were no longer navigating uncertainty. They were in love. Openly. Intentionally. Raymond often drove down to visit Janet's mother, never empty-handed. Gifts, provisions, small tokens of care, gestures that spoke louder than words. Respect. Acceptance. Belonging. And in return, Janet stepped gently into Raymond's world. In the evenings, she would come over to his house, moving with quiet ease as she prepared dinner, simple meals, filled with familiarity and comfort. It wasn't grand. But it was real. One evening, as they sat together, Janet opened up. I have an OND, she said softly. There was a hint of hesitation in her voice, as though unsure how it might be received. Raymond looked at her. And smiled. That's a good start, he replied calmly. You can go as far as you want. Janet looked up, surprised. I'll support you, he continued. Whatever level you choose, I'll make sure you get there. Her eyes softened. Then he added, almost casually. And we'll also set up a business for you. A proper one. Janet blinked. A boutique, he said. A big one. For a moment, she said nothing. Because what she was hearing was not just promise. It was partnership. And in that quiet evening, their future began to take shape. For the past 3 months, Stella had been floating on expectation. Henry's promises. The talk of a grand society wedding. The prestige that seemed almost within reach. It had all felt certain. Until it wasn't. Just a week ago, everything changed. Henry's father failed to secure re-election into the Senate. And with that single outcome, the atmosphere shifted. What was once confident became uncertain. What was once promising became quiet. Since then, things had begun to fall apart. Subtly at first. Then clearly. Henry was no longer as present. The calls reduced. The messages slowed. The enthusiasm faded. The conversations about marriage disappeared entirely. Now, there was silence. Not the kind that rests, but the kind that withdraws. Stella sat alone, her thoughts unsettled. The excitement that once lifted her spirit had suddenly dropped. And for the first time, she began to feel it. Uncertainty. Stella sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in hand. She dialed Henry's number again. The call went through. It rang. And rang. But there was no response. She stared at the screen for a moment before slowly pulling the phone away from her ear. Silence. Again. Just as she was about to drop the phone beside her, it rang. Maggie. She answered. Hello. Maggie's voice came quickly. Stella, have you heard? Stella frowned slightly. Heard what? Raymond is back in the country, Maggie said. And I'm hearing he's planning to marry that girl. Janet. The words landed heavily. Stella froze. For a moment, she said nothing. The room suddenly felt smaller. Quieter. Different. Are you serious? She finally asked, her voice lower now. That's what I heard, Maggie replied. The call ended shortly after. But Stella remained still. Because the news had hit her. Unexpectedly. And deeply. That night, Stella lay awake in bed. Her eyes were open, but her mind was restless. Sleep did not come. Instead, her thoughts moved quickly, intensely. Raymond was back. And planning to marry Janet. The reality unsettled her. What once seemed close now felt like something she could still reach. Her mind began to race. How do I get back into his life? How do I undo this? She turned slightly, staring into the darkness. Ideas began to form. Calculated. Deliberate. Janet has to be removed from the picture. The thought came quietly at first. Then stayed. Raymond was supposed to choose me. Her breathing slowed, but her mind grew sharper. He can still choose me. The longer she lay there, the clearer her intentions became. Not hope. Not chance. But strategy. By the time the night deepened, Stella was no longer just thinking. She was planning. That evening, Janet closed late at the restaurant. The streets were quieter than usual as she stepped out, adjusting her bag and beginning the familiar walk toward the bus stop where she normally caught a ride home. It was a route she knew well. Routine. Safe, or so she believed. The street ahead was dimly lit, with only a few distant sounds breaking the silence. Then, a black SUV sped past her. Too fast. Too sudden. Before she could process it, the vehicle braked sharply just ahead. Everything that followed happened in seconds. The doors flung open. Two men jumped out. They moved quickly. One covered her mouth. The other grabbed her legs. Janet struggled. But there was no time. No space. No help. In one swift motion, they forced her into the vehicle. The door slammed shut. And just as suddenly as it had appeared, the SUV sped off into the night, leaving the street empty and silent. That evening, Raymond had made plans. Dinner with Janet. A simple night. A meaningful one. By 8:30 p.m., he checked his phone again. No message. No call. He frowned. He dialed her number. Switched off. A slight unease crept in. Janet always responded. Always. He tried again. Still nothing. Within minutes, unease turned to alarm. Raymond grabbed his keys and drove straight to the restaurant. When he arrived, he asked for her. They told him she had been on the afternoon shift. It ended at 7:30 p.m. And she had left. Since then, no one had seen her. A cold feeling settled in his chest. Without wasting another second, Raymond drove to Janet's house. Her mother opened the door. The moment she saw his face, she knew something was wrong. Is Janet here? He asked quickly. Her expression changed. No, she hasn't returned, she said. She left for work this morning. The words hit hard. Raymond and her mother looked at each other. And in that instant, fear became real. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Without hesitation, they stepped out together. Into the night. Searching. That same night, Raymond rushed to inform his mother. She listened, and for the first time in a long while, fear replaced composure. Something is not right, she said quietly. Without delay, they went to the police station. Raymond explained everything, the missed calls, the restaurant, her mother's concern, the sudden disappearance. The officers listened. Then one of them spoke calmly. You may need to wait 24 hours. She could still return. Raymond stared at him. Wait. Nothing about this felt normal. Nothing about Janet's silence made sense. He was restless. Disoriented. Time dragged. Each minute heavier than the last. Then, just before midnight, Raymond's phone rang. He froze. Janet. He answered immediately. Janet. Where are you? Are you? Her voice cut in. Calm. Strangely calm. I just want to tell you, Raymond. I have never loved you. Raymond went silent. I don't want you, she continued. I was only pretending all along. I'm a gold digger, only interested in your money. His grip tightened around the phone. "I've decided to elope with my boyfriend," she added. "I'm not coming back to you." Raymond's heart pounded. "I don't understand what you're saying," he said, his voice strained. But she repeated it. Word for word. The same cold tone. The same finality. Then the line went dead. Raymond stood still. Stunned. Confused. Because something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. He whispered to himself. Is that really Janet? A chilling thought followed. Or has someone taken her voice? Raymond stood still long after the call ended. The words echoed in his mind. Cold. Detached. Unfamiliar. I have never loved you. I'm a gold digger. I've eloped with my boyfriend. He shook his head slowly. No. Something wasn't right. That wasn't Janet. Not the Janet he knew. Not the Janet who stayed. Who called. Who cared. A wave of confusion hit him. Did she really mean it? Or was she forced to say those things? His chest tightened. Without wasting time, he dialed her number again. Switched off. He tried again. Still off. The silence returned. Heavy. Unsettling. Raymond sank into a chair, his mind racing. Minutes passed. Then more. By the time the clock crept toward 1 a.m., he was still there, thinking, replaying, analyzing every word, every tone, every pause. Then suddenly, an idea formed. Sharp. Clear. Where was she calling from? If he could find that, he could find her. Raymond sat upright. Technology had advanced. He knew that much. Calls could be traced. Locations identified. There had to be a way. Then he remembered. One of his friends. Benson. An ICT expert. Telecommunications. If anyone could help him track the origin of that call, it would be him. Raymond grabbed his phone again. Now, he had a lead. By 2 a.m., Raymond was already on the road. The streets were nearly empty as he drove with urgency toward Benson's house. Benson, his friend. An ICT expert. A telecommunications specialist. If anyone could make sense of what had just happened, it was him. Moments later, Raymond arrived and knocked repeatedly. Benson opened the door, surprised. Raymond. At this hour. Raymond didn't waste time. I need your help. They moved inside, and Raymond quickly narrated everything: Janet's disappearance, the strange call, the words that didn't sound like her. Benson listened carefully, his expression growing serious. When Raymond finished, Benson leaned back slightly. There is technology that can identify a caller's location, he said. Raymond leaned forward immediately. What kind of technology? Benson continued. There's mass triangulation. GPS, even systems like E911. Raymond held his gaze. So we can track where she called from. Benson nodded slowly. It's possible. A flicker of hope crossed Raymond's face. But Benson raised a hand. There's a catch. Raymond's expression tightened. For any telecom company to use those systems to locate a caller, Benson said firmly. The police must authorize it. Silence fell. Hope. But with a condition. And time was already running. Benson leaned forward, his tone now more precise. There's something else you need to understand, he said. Raymond watched him closely. These technologies, mass triangulation, GPS, E911, work best when there's an active signal, Benson explained. In simple terms, we need another call from her number. Raymond's jaw tightened. So if she doesn't call again? It becomes much harder, Benson replied. Silence. Raymond exhaled slowly. I just hope there will be another call. Benson nodded, understanding the weight behind those words. Raymond stood up abruptly. We can't wait, he said. We have to move. Benson looked at him. What are you thinking? Raymond's voice was firm now. We go to the police headquarters. He continued. We have to convince them there's enough reason to suspect she may have been abducted. Benson listened. If we can get them to see it that way, Raymond added. They can authorize the network provider to track her number the moment it becomes active again. A brief pause. Then Benson stood. All right, he said. Within minutes. They were on their way. Into the night. With urgency. And a fragile thread of hope. By 2:30 a.m., Raymond and Benson arrived at the police headquarters. The night air was heavy. But Raymond wasted no time. He briefed the officers, everything. Janet's disappearance. The strange phone call. The unnatural tone. The repeated words. I believe she has been abducted, Raymond said firmly. There's no ransom demand yet, but something is wrong. The officers exchanged looks. This was no longer a routine case. Time passed in tense discussion. Questions. Clarifications. Deliberation. By 4:05 a.m., the authorization was granted. Raymond felt a surge of urgency. There was no time to waste. Immediately, he and Benson moved to the headquarters of the telecommunications company, where Benson worked. They met with other ICT experts. Systems were prepared. Devices activated. Screens lit up with technical interfaces. Everything was set. Now, they waited. For one thing. Another call from Janet's line. Minutes stretched. Silence filled the room. Then, at exactly 5:10 a.m., Raymond's phone rang. Janet. His heart raced. He answered instantly. Janet. Her voice came through again. Cold. Rehearsed. The same message. The same words. But this time, Raymond wasn't alone. As the call connected, the ICT experts sprang into action. Rapid keystrokes. Data streams. Signal tracing. Within seconds, coordinates appeared on the screen. A location. They had it. The call had been traced. Far from the city's noise, on the quiet outskirts of Lagos, stood an abandoned building. It belonged to Stella's family. Locked up for years. Forgotten by most. Hidden in plain sight. That was where Janet had been taken. The men who abducted her were not acting randomly. They had been sent by Stella. Inside the building, Janet sat restrained, shaken, confused, and frightened. Since she was brought there, Stella had visited. Calm, controlled, deliberate. She had given one clear instruction. Janet must call Raymond twice and say the same thing. That she never loved him. That she was a gold digger. That she had chosen someone else. At first, Janet resisted. But pressure mounted. And eventually, she was forced to speak. For Stella, this was important. Raymond had to believe it. He had to be convinced that Janet's love was never real. Only then could she erase her from his life completely. But that was not the end of the plan. Stella had something darker in mind. Something final. Once Janet's voice had served its purpose, she intended to silence her permanently. Make it appear as though Janet had disappeared by choice. As though she had eloped and vanished. No trace. No questions. Then, Stella would return back into Raymond's life, as though nothing had ever stood in her way. By 5:30 a.m., the abandoned building remained quiet. Inside, Stella and the men she had hired were relaxed, satisfied. Everything, in their minds, was going according to plan. Janet had made the calls. Raymond would believe them. The story would soon settle. A clean disappearance. No suspicion. Stella allowed herself a small smile. It was almost over. Then, a loud crash. The front door burst open. Police. The shout echoed through the building. Before anyone could react, armed officers stormed in from multiple directions. Chaos. The men tried to move. Too late. They were overpowered immediately. Stella froze, shock written across her face. This was not part of the plan. Within moments, she was restrained. Handcuffed. Speechless. Across the room, Janet was found. Weak. Shaken. But alive. An officer quickly moved to free her. "You're safe now," he said firmly. Outside, the first light of dawn began to break. The plan that had been so carefully crafted had collapsed in an instant. The case moved swiftly through the courts. What initially appeared mysterious became clear under investigation. Evidence was overwhelming. Call records, location data, witness accounts, and Janet's testimony. Everything pointed in one direction. The abduction had been planned, deliberate, and driven by intent to cause serious harm. Stella and the men involved stood trial. The courtroom was tense as details of the plot were laid bare: the deception, the false calls, the plan to make Janet disappear. When Judgment Day arrived, silence filled the room. The judge spoke firmly. The crimes were grave, calculated, unforgivable, and the sentence reflected it. Stella and the members of the gang were sentenced to life imprisonment. The gavel fell. Final. Justice had been served. In the quiet days after everything had settled, Raymond and Janet finally had a moment alone. No fear. No distance. Just truth. Janet sat beside him, her hands gently clasped together. There's something I need to tell you, she said softly. Raymond looked at her, calm. That night, the call, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't mean any of it. She paused. I was forced, at gunpoint. Stella made me say those things. Silence lingered for a moment. Raymond didn't look surprised. Instead, he gave a faint, knowing smile. I already knew, he said quietly. Janet looked up, startled. Raymond leaned closer. I know you, he added. That wasn't you. Relief washed over her face. The weight she had carried melted away in that moment. Raymond reached for her hand. No matter what they tried to make you say, he said gently. I never doubted your heart. And in that quiet space, their love stood, unshaken. Peace slowly returned. After everything that had happened, Raymond and Janet found their way back to each other. Stronger. Deeper. What they had was no longer just love. It was tested. And proven. In the weeks that followed, their bond grew even closer. Conversations became warmer, laughter returned, and the future no longer felt uncertain. A decision was made. They would get married. Plans began. Families met. Preparations unfolded. Excitement filled the air. And when the day finally came, it was beautiful. A glamorous and colorful celebration. Music. Joy. Tradition. Elegance. Raymond's family, once hesitant, now welcomed Janet wholeheartedly. She was no longer an outsider. She was family. Smiles were everywhere. Blessings were spoken. Love was celebrated. And as Raymond stood beside Janet, he knew. He had chosen right. In the years that followed, they built a life together. Peaceful. Joyful. Complete. Raymond and Janet lived a happy marital life. A story that began with uncertainty, but ended in love. And just like that, 2 words, 1 heart comes to a close. From love and doubt, to distance, danger, and destiny. This journey has been unforgettable. Thank you for watching, supporting, and believing in the story. This is the end of this series, 2 words, 1 heart. A brand new drama series is coming soon. With even more twists, emotions, and surprises. Stay tuned, like, share, and subscribe. Because the next story is about to begin.